You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozar. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Headlines today, the 22nd of August. Black woman accused of racism on London bus. 2 males wanted in connection with rape of 14-year-old boy. Illegal immigrant receives £17,000 from English taxpayers. New database to be set up to track illegals. Nuclear reactor shut down in Belgium. The Guardian on Australian immigration rules. Thought for the day, silent witness, oh yeah. And finally, I will eat you. UK news. A black woman has been arrested for racism on a London bus. The 34-year-old, who has not yet been named, shouted outbursts such as "I hate white people, I can't stand none of you." She then stated that we brought her here. The rant continued and she was arrested in Hackney, London. One of the many facts she did get wrong was her statement, "My parents are African born in Jamaica and I'm African born in England." A World at 8 reporter commented, "Strange how that works out. If you're born in Jamaica of African descent, that makes you Jamaican. And unfortunately, if you're born in England of any descent, that makes you a British citizen. This poor uneducated creature doesn't understand if one is born here, you cannot be brought over here. In fact, this dingbat should be the cover girl for Hope Not Hate. Somewhere in Jamaica or Brixton, a village has lost his idiot." The hunt is on in Manchester for an Asian man and his white accomplice who raped a 14-year-old boy. At around 4:45 on Saturday the 2nd of June, the teen victim was in the Arndale Centre near the entrance of Aldi and Subway. He entered the toilets there and was approached by 2 men, one Asian and the other white. They demanded the boy go with them. They grabbed him and took him into the nearby Debenhams toilet where he was raped by the Asian. The traumatised boy got the police, and apart from the ongoing investigation, the trauma officers have been assigned to help the lad. Photographs of the rapist and his pal are on the internet news websites. The victim is said to be devastated at what has happened to him. Anyone with information is asked to call North Manchester CID on 0161 856 3240 or Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111. A World at 8 reporter comments, "The one strange thing about this awful crime is that why did the men take the boy from one toilet to the Debenhams toilet? I would have thought to these men one loo would be much like another. It would seem a case of a missed opportunity." An illegal immigrant has been awarded £17,360 at the High Court for being wrongly imprisoned. African Joseph Mjemer, 28, who arrived in the UK as a stowaway in 2003 and was held by Home Office officials as they tried to establish his country of origin. Judge Stephen Stewart QC concluded he should be freed and paid damages by the Home Office for loss of liberty. Mjemer was convicted of more than 20 offences in the 3 years following his arrival in the UK, and he also bought the action after being granted legal aid. He has consistently professed to be British, Italian, Moroccan, Algerian and stateless. Mjemer has also used aliases in connection with fraudulent deals. He was taken in administrative custody in 2007 because it was feared he would abscond whilst officials were trying to establish where he came from in order to deport him. Since his release, Mjemer will live in West London and wear a tag. A World at 8 reporter comments, "He is African and should be returned there, anywhere but here, minus the £17,000 which the authorities should take back in part payment of legal aid fees and all the work this bastard has been responsible for over the last 9 years. And as an afterthought, get rid of that judge, Stephen Stewart QC." A new database is being set up by border chiefs in Britain. The database is to track what they say are the 150,000 illegals living in this country. The border agency is apparently dealing with over 276,000 immigration cases at the moment. That's the equivalent to the entire population of Newcastle. Private companies will be allowed to tender for the contract. Also, over a third of immigrants decide to overstay their visa when it expires. This applies to so-called students and workers who just disappear. A World at 8 writer has commented, "There should be a system whereby all British nationals should report non-British to the police, who should approach them and ask them for their passports. It is tough, but it will soon be the only way to avoid the Human Rights Act and all the legalities and expenses that these people are costing us in this day and age. Our left-wing idiots are running around like headless chickens with the fact that these illegals will have their DNA stored on record. So what? Do they want England to get worse and more overrun?" Euronews. Belgium has closed down one of its 7 nuclear power plants owing to suspected cracks in one of the steel casings, including the tank containing the reactor core. The reactor, Doel 3, which is 25 kilometres north of Antwerp, provides a sixth of the country's nuclear generated power, but does not pose a health and safety threat, quoted the AFCN, but will remain shut until September. A warning: if you're holidaying in Portugal, be wary of sea bathing. Little Lara Lewis is the 8th person to die this year by being carried out to sea. Lara, aged just 5 years old, was washed out to sea by a freak wave with her 66-year-old grandfather, Brian O'Dyer. Paramedics were at the scene but both sadly drowned. Their family had watched from the beach in horror and are now being treated for shock. The child's grandmother was also swept out by the strong tide but was rescued by fishermen. World news. Despite the brouhaha in the Guardian newspaper about the immigration policies of the Australian government, the Australian Parliament is busy slapping its own back. After almost a year of political stalemate on asylum seekers, federal politicians have agreed to send those who try to reach Australia by boat to Nauru and Papua New Guinea. The House of Representatives passed the vote today and the Senate are expected to pass it on Thursday. The Guardian is clearly taking the immigration rules of another country very seriously and quotes, "But despite Prime Minister Julia Gillard declaring that this House has risen above the politics of this issue and taken clear action to save lives, many Australians feel deflated and a bit embarrassed by their Parliament." In the real world, it is reported that Australia has seen unauthorised boat arrivals skyrocket in recent months. So far this year, more than 7,900 people have arrived in Australian waters. This compares to about 4,005 people for the whole of 2011. It also compares to the handful of boats that arrived after former Prime Minister John Howard's government instituted tough border protection measures in 2001, including offshore processing. Measures Labour took great pleasure in dismantling after it won office in 2007. More worrying to The Guardian are the number of people who have died when their boats failed to make the journey from Indonesia to Australia. The Guardian calls these people who are in favour of uncontrolled immigration progressives and cites their concerns about human rights and detention. Very few of our newspapers comment on the terrible effects of uncontrolled and unmonitored immigration from any one country to another. It is simply not mentioned. The Guardian has seen a vast reduction in sales over the last years, and it could be they are backing the wrong horse. Barack Obama has made a clear warning to Syrian President Assad over new tactics they say could be used against the rebels. Obama stated that military action against Syria would be implemented if President Assad used any form of chemical weapons against those who are trying to overthrow him. Sources say that Washington is already involved in the overthrow of President Assad by this blackmail. A World Today reporter commented, "If one tack fails, then try another. I admire Assad for sticking to his guns against the big bully boys of the combined forces of the West, the UN and extremist Muslims." Thought for the day. Silent witness? I will endorse that one. Before I start my thought for the day, which is based on our Muslim grooming problem and the way the media sees it, primarily in the latest Silent Witness aired on Sunday and Monday, at long last I must comment on an illegal immigrant. Joseph Mjemer has been described by a judge as a one-man crime wave and has received for this title a very nice sum of 17,000 smackers. This was awarded because he was detained by the Home Office because he would have run away whilst they were trying to ascertain where he came from. Why? Because this man lies, and lies over his country of origin, and appears to get paid for doing so by our legal system. He was also given legal aid for the purpose of doing so. Illegal immigrants have no way of supporting themselves, so crime is the only way they can live in Britain. Prisons in Britain are jam-packed with illegal immigrants awaiting trial or serving sentences between 2 and 15 years for robbery, burglary, fraud and rape. Now we have judges giving them money for creating mayhem with our legal system. My solution: ignore the Human Rights Act, and as this man is obviously African, dump him back there. And take by rule of thumb general colour coding. If they look Arab, dump them back. If they look Indian or Pakistani, dump them back. If they look Far Eastern, dump them back. I'm sure we Brits are not that stupid, surely. We need tough love in this country, or we will not have much of a country left. And now to the subject close to my heart, the Muslim sexual grooming of underage girls. Well, the one thing I can say about this BBC One expose of sexual grooming of underage girls was that it came the nearest that anyone has ever portrayed this crime in all its nastiness. There were, however, the usual misinformation additions to throw the average uninformed member of the great British public a complete wobbly. The girls portrayed were around 15 and were fully up for the first part of the grooming procedure, the pick-up, the friends and the presents, even going so far as to photograph their private parts and send them via mobiles to the groomers. Very classy. The one thing this did is to make all the victims completely open, if you'll excuse the expression, to what follows. It was meant to portray the girls as not nice, and in the words of one of the groomers, they have no pride, man, it is the way they are brought up, skex. The one fact that this did state was the groomers have no respect or love for what they class as easy white meat, and this is true. It wasn't until the last episode that the groomers and rapists were seen as Muslim. Even though some shots were under the looming height of the local mosque, none were shown going to prayers or living with their families, which is in truth what and who they are. These groomers are businessmen and are part of the Muslim communities. They have mothers and fathers and all the rest who know exactly what is going on. The usual groomer does not sit around in a taxi cab firm all day and operate business on the side. Also, the prime groomers were not at school or even showed waiting outside, which is what they do. The girls made all the appearance of chasing them and being available for clothing, shopping and general shenanigans in public. The boys were older and working, of course, and used a local Muslim-owned cafe for their trysts. They had to have one of their number who did not like anything his brothers were doing and at the end proved the hero, which is very, very unlikely, but it made it BBC approved. There, you see, they aren't all that bad. One of the victim mothers married a Muslim. Now, I do not know of any of the past real-life victims who have had Muslim stepfathers, but if they had, I couldn't see on past records that a Muslim stepchild, whatever colour, would be approached for grooming. Indeed, the revenge this probably non-existent fellow took on the main rapist, because that is what they are, was lifelike and just what an enraged Muslim stepdad would do. Good on him. Two of the other mothers were low-life ignorant bitches and no daughter deserved them. The whole timbre of the series was that it was well acted and the people were suitably shot, which they are not in real life. It veered away from the actual reasons why young Muslim men rape and sometimes kill white and indeed other ethnic non-Muslim girls. The TV reason was that these girls were vulnerable, from rather grotty homes and hooked on the celeb and drink culture. Probably true in some cases, but not all. The true reason behind these abductions and rape is a culture of which we Westerners know and understand nothing. Even in the film they got an Asian. That word Asian worked overtime, I might add. A police constable, Mahmood, a Muslim, I would think, to handle matters now, that might work with groomers but not with the young white girls, who were generally petrified into total silence and in one case suicide. This part is true, and I have met total silence and misinformation from their parents at the Coalition for the Removal of Pimping and in the few contacts I've had through ProFam. This film showed the police bringing in people and forming groups to handle these cases, but in real life there is still a marked reluctance on the part of the police, the council and even the parents to actually become public. They are in fact frightened of the repercussions from the Muslims they usually live so near to. That is real life, not the TV. These groomings are still being handled as one-off cases and not the norm, when in fact they have been the norm in many of our northern cities for the last 30 years. The overall impression I got from this film was that the girls were worldly, up for it from dodgy homes. The groomers were not only disrespectful but downright rude about these girls and obviously despised them. That was the true bit, as was the dingy room and the relays of male relatives and friends who paid for young white trash. If this film was done with the idea of jumping on the British National Party bandwagon of several years ago, it succeeded, if only to discourage youngsters from being taken in and to be wary. The reasoning in this film behind why these men did it was not touched. Real life reasons are availability and money. That is, lack of availability with their own girls and women of the Muslim faith and the obvious availability of our very young girls for a bit of cheap underwear, a round of drinks, drugs and cheap jewellery. The next is money. They recoup the amount spent on getting these youngsters submissive with a few nights of farming them out in their party houses to friends and male relatives. These men have to pay for the pleasure. In this film it was intimated that they had pimped out a girl to a white man. This would not happen, but it makes us whites complicit in this grooming from the BBC angle. The general lack of communication from victims and parents, plus a murder of one of the girls by her white father, all impinged on the general message of the Muslim grooming scandals as seen in real life terms. This says something about our society, BBC and the Marxist dominated magazines and the celeb culture. It shows we are going wrong. We have abandoned discipline for vicarious pleasures on a massive scale. On another tale, this black woman on a Hackney bus yelling and showing off said something very true. She said in a nutshell, you all want to be black. You have fillers in your lips, you sit on your sunbeds to be black. And she is right. Look at that statement, it is true. Our fashions are geared to bright colours and trousers under skirts. Very Asian in fact. Our youngsters do not want to be what they are born as, white and English. They want to be coloured, and if they fail in that they want coloured boyfriends. As in this show, they skirt around the religion of these rapists because even the BBC do not want to upset the Muslim communities around the country. But at long last there are prosecutions coming to light, and for that we have to thank Nazir Afzal for his part in bringing the Rochdale rapists to justice. In all fairness, I do believe that even he could not ignore his community's part for many years in these crimes, and it was of course the reason that this silent witness was not aired, was that the Rochdale grooming case was being heard at the time. Mr Afzal is now pursuing arranged marriage amongst the traveller communities. Now this takes the heat away entirely from the Muslim grooming problem, which has not gone away. This film opened eyes but often to the wrong problem and the wrong solution. We still have a lot of work to do. And finally, Cupid, the two-stone cat, has been returned home safely after being stolen. The heavyweight pussycat was sitting in the back garden of his Austrian home in Langskron when thieves pounced on him and catnapped him. Cupid, who is a fluffy two-stone pedigree Maine Coon, is reported to be worth around £3,000, but was later returned by the catnappers because he probably ate them out of house and home. It was suggested that when he returned home even heavier, that he may have eaten one of them. This presenter has to comment, I am a cat person, and I hope he did just that. I have seen Cupid's picture and he is a very handsome fellow. Being Austrian of course helped. They do not put up with that, these Austrian pussies. You will return me home immediately. I just had to say that, sorry. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.